Dr. Jeffrey Bland, I had been manifesting the opportunity to get to interview you over the last month, especially after being at PLMI. And then literally that same day, I got an email to have you on the show. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. So thank you so much for joining me.
Wow, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Your energy, as I was mentioning, that you brought to our PLMI meeting was radiant. So you're carrying the health with you everywhere you go. So this is...
Thank you so much. And I'm excited. I'll get to see you again in literally a week. So I'm super excited for that. I just asked you, what is a question that someone hasn't asked you that you would love them to ask? And I'm going to kick off with that. And we're talking about the root cause of disease. And, if that's what we're all seeking, or at least functional medicine practitioners and who are really looking to support somebody in their journey, where do we even start when it comes to discovering what the root cause of disease is?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really, really great and provocative question. And I want to be very cautious to say I don't think any one person has all the answers, but at least we can now start to focus in on some of the answers that come to that question. So let me start with a very hard-hitting and bold statement. I believe that there is now very, very strong support for the fact that the present diets that 40% of our population are consuming as their major food each day, these processed food diets, is an existential threat to humanity.
Agreed.
Not just because what's in it, but also what's not in it, what was taken out, the combination of the two.
It's the void. Yeah.
And as a consequence of this, which all comes about after World War II, when we developed these K rations for military service people to keep them from having malnutrition in the war, these highly processed diets are compromising our health. They're shortening our lifespans, and they're moving us to the point where reproductive biology is being compromised, both in men and women. Sperm counts are going down. Women are having more fertility problems, such that the data says that by 2050, we may have the bulk of births in this country born by IVF because the traditional methods of reproduction will not be viable. I mean, these are more than wake-up calls. This is an extraordinary critical period of time for us to be very, very focused on how could that be? How could things that we call food have these extraordinary adverse effects on our health? And that goes back to what's the root cause. So to me, if I look at biology, and I'm a biological scientist, so that's kind of where I gravitate to, and ask what within our body is the most sensitive to these things that we're exposing ourselves to, like this ultra-processed diet. And I came to the conclusion that there are really only two places that are surveying the outside world to tell our inside body how to work 24/7, 365. And that's the nervous system and the immune system. And those two systems are interconnected. And they regulate how we look, act, and feel. They speak to every organ of our body. And in fact, it's interesting to note that the immune system you can find in every organ. There's an immune system component in the liver, in the muscle, in the brain, in the heart, in the intestines, obviously, as is there a part of the nervous system in every organ. Now, I ask the question, what other organs in our body are in every other organ? Is the heart in the lungs? Is the kidney in the liver? No. Those are all separate. Why then is the nervous and immune system in every organ? It's because that's where the root connection between our outside world is established. And we're getting then messages all the time, every moment of our lives, whether we're sleeping or waking, we're getting messages from our environment, how we think, how we act, what we're exposed to, how we eat, how we move, how we sleep. All those things are being translated by our immune and nervous systems into ultimately how we look, act, and feel. Now, if what I just said is true, which I believe it to be true, then why would the immune system maybe be a focus for our root cause concern? Because the immune system, it turns out, as contrasted to the nervous system, turns over, it changes about every 4 months. So the immune cells in your body today will principally be gone, and you'll have new ones to replace it 4 months from now. Now, the question is, the ones that you replace your ones you have today with, are they going to be as good, better, or worse than the ones they're replacing? And the science that has developed around the immune system over the last couple of decades says, on average, in America, the immune system of people as they grow older is worse, not better. Now, that begs the question, is that hardwired into our biology such that you just start falling apart? Your immune system becomes less capable of recognizing friend from foe and having problems? Or is it something that we are doing to our immune system that is then causing the immune system to react in that way? And of course, I believe it's the latter. I think that the immune system is being exposed to things that it's getting bad experiences, and it's remembering those bad experiences. And it collects all these memories of bad experiences so that over time, the immune system becomes more and more alarmed. And as it becomes alarmed, its personality is to defend us against the principal thing of death. So it does everything it needs to do to keep us from dying, and it fights back. And how does the immune system fight back? It fights back with all of its tools, its Army, Navy, and Air Force. And that is the process that we call inflammation. And it's interesting to note that today, the major disorders that we see are conditions associated with chronic inflammation. The New York Times just recently, in fact, last week, had an article on inflammation saying that this has become the kind of the buzzword of the new generations of health fads. And that now everybody's landed on inflammation as the fad, and that we're overblowing it because inflammation is a positive thing. It's not all negative, and we should not be castigating inflammation and pointing fingers at it. And it's exaggerated in the way it's being discussed now, particularly by biohackers, according to this article. And I can understand why they would take that position, but I think it's a little bit of an exaggeration, because the reason that the inflammation has become more prominent, this kind of simmering inflammation, not acute inflammation, but simmering inflammation, which has been called inflammaging, the inflammation associated with the pot boiling that increases aging, that is a condition associated with our immune system never feeling quite safe, feeling not at home. And so it's kind of fighting back to what it considers things that are putting our life in jeopardy. Now, what are those things?
Yeah,
well, they start with what we eat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they start with
one of the substrates that we're continuously bringing into the body that the immune system has to survey.
That's exactly right. And people have asked the question, why is it that more than 60%, something like 70% or more of the immune system is clustered around our intestinal tract? What I remind people is that over the course of living, we will eat on average somewhere around 5 to 10 tons of food, which is foreign to our body. And therefore, our body has to make a decision what's friend and what's foe. And so the immune system is the first barrier to make that intelligent decision as to what to let in the body and what not to let in the body. So our immune system is clustered around the intestinal tract, as the immune system is also clustered around our lungs and our breathing apparatus, because that's the other place where we're constantly exposed to the outside environment. So those are the places that you have the highest activity of your immune system, which when it's feeling it's under siege or at risk, it's going to fight back. And now inflammation becomes the risk of our age. So I think that this concept of chronic inflammation as a root cause of many downstream diseases is to me a very important concept. And also because the immune system turns over and is reproduced so frequently every 3 to 4 months, then you have the chance to do something, meaning you can be different, you can be better. And we call that immunorejuvenation. You can actually rejuvenate that immune system. This is a whole kind of new breakthrough in the field of immunology in the last 10 to 15 years, that the immune system it's a two-way street. It can pick up bad memories and create alarm, but can also get rid of bad memories with new opportunities to create friendly memories.
Yeah, I hearken that to also, we used to believe that the brain was static, that it wasn't malleable, we couldn't change it. We know, kind of similar to the immune system, that there's a lot that we can do to create a healthier brain moving forward. We don't have to subscribe to cognitive decline, which is driven by inflammation, driven by a wayward immune system. Let's talk a little bit about being a new us in 90 days to 4 months. As we talked about, I just want to share a little story. A couple months ago, we were on a little trip. We were going to a pumpkin patch. That's what we were doing. And with my son, and I did not pack enough water. We have a purified water system in our home. because again, being mindful about what types of things that we're putting into our bodies. And it was a hot day and my son sucks down water like it's his job, which is really awesome. And we had to go into a grocery store, and we weren't in a food desert. It was a really big grocery store, and I was starting to go down the aisles looking for water in a glass container. And by I would say 12th aisle, Dr. Bland, I was starting to feel anxious because it was,
yeah.
I think I was mind blown. And we shop at farmers markets. We kind of shop more locally. This was a superstore, mega store. And I remember back in, I would say the early 2000s when I was educating about whole foods and, antioxidant rich foods and fiber rich foods, I would tell my patients in my community to just shop the perimeter. But even in this store, the perimeter was not safe. And it was thousands and thousands and thousands of ultra processed food products as I'm looking for this water for my son.
Wow.
And I just thought, I think the thing that was giving me so much anxiety was that how does a typical parent, family member, adult navigate this grocery store for their family? Because I would say 85 to 90% of that store was ultra processed foods. And it was this was like a very reputable, what we consider to be a typical store that a family would shop in. And I thought, how do we manage this or navigate this? Like, even if you're being educated in these conversations, you walk into a store like this and it's almost like you're kind of forced to make these decisions based on the marketing, based on the packaging. You think you're making the right choice for your family when really you're not.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting on it. This is where the tire meets the road, right? This is going from the kind of theoretic, esoteric to the reality of what are we going to eat and how do we prepare it. I've been kind of watching because I do a lot of the shopping in our family and I'm kind of a journeyman cook, chef. And, I always watch who else is in the store and how they're selecting things off the shelves. And I'm kind of encouraged because what I see are a lot more men now in the store, at least that I shop in, and they're carrying their cell phones and they have their lists on and they're doing kind of intelligent procurement. So they're working off some kind of recipe probably that's then focusing them on certain ingredients. The key now is to be able to tell them where in the store those ingredients reside that are going to allow them to form really good, fun, nutritious, tasty foods that fulfill the criteria of nutrient density and are also easy to prepare. So I think that people like you are really helping us to translate the theory into the practice of where do you go? How do you do this? And I'm writing a book right now that's going to be focused on this whole immune revolution that we're going through. And it will have my learnings about where foods reside within the store that you can select. And then how does it get translated into your food plan, which you have to go in with a strategy. You can't just go in willy-nilly because it's easy just to pick up the packages as you go through and not have a plan.
I agreed. Well, one of the things that I really loved listening to at PLMI was the intersection between the immune system and the metabolic system or metabolic health. And, there's a lot of conversation around metabolic health right now. I believe that the most recent stats around children, and as a mom, this hits home for me, that around 1 in 3 of our children are pre-diabetic. So that this is more of a, metabolic crisis that's happening even earlier in childhood. And so I wanted to focus a little bit on that interception because I know this is a lot of what I'm talking about is how do we support our overall cellular energy and our metabolic health by creating metabolically healthy meals. And the way that I think about it is, well, how are we fueling our future brains or our future immune system? But I find that there's a lot of fear around cognitive decline. So I tend to focus more on how do we create that future brain that we really want so that it's firing on all cylinders for us. But it's this intersection between metabolic health and the immune system. Would you be willing to spend a little bit of time there so we just connect the dots about how we are seeing this inflammation being created?
Yes, again, having followed this field for a number of decades, now nearly 5, it's hard to believe when I even say that. I guess I say that because I just in a couple of months, I have my 80th birthday. So I'm kind of signaling that as an interesting benchmark, having been in this field now for over 50 years. And so I've really been concerned about that very question that you're asking, and I think it's on all of our minds, is that how do we navigate through this complex series of things that we have available, that some of which are to our detriment and some of which are for our health. So I think it's come down, when I look at the body of science, to three areas that have really strong evidence of support for immune health and brain health. And the reason I think those are interrelated is the brain has its own immune system, which is called the microglia. These are cells of our immune system that happen to reside in our brain that communicate to our neurons in our brain. And so the immune system is very, very active in the brain in signaling health or alarm to the neurons. And so the three areas that have really come about, we could deep dive into each of these, are number one, polyphenol-rich foods. And polyphenols are a family of nutrients that are in plants. There's several thousand of them. People might know them because some of them impart the color to vegetables and fruits. So if you eat by the rainbow in natural foods, you're going to get a high level of these. They're also found in whole grains and in legumes. So you find these in vegetable products, different families of them, flavones, flavonoids, anthocyanidins. I mean, there are a whole series of different types of them. And they all have very, very important roles to play in specifically sending signals to the immune system to rejuvenate itself. They're not just antioxidants preventing rancidity.
Yeah.
They're actually doing work to communicate to the immune system to be in a younger state, basically, a younger biological state. So that's one. Number two, which people have heard a lot about, are the omega-3 fatty acids. We think of them in fish oils, but they can also be found in certain vegetables as well, or in certain marine algae. And these particular oils, with names like eicosapentaenoic or docosahexaenoic, EPA and DHA, have very important roles to play in terms of the brain architecture and the immune architecture. In fact, something like 70% of the material that makes up brain cells are derived from these omega-3 fatty acids. So they're really very, very important in brain neurological health. And we get those, again, by eating minimally processed cold water fish, cold weather vegetables that are rich in alpha-linoleic acid, flax being a good one. Mm-hmm. And so these particular components of the diet, starting really with infants, getting adequate omega-3s is very important for building both an immune system and the nervous system health. We also now know that there is something else about the omega-3 fats that has only, within the last 15 years or so, become interesting as to their benefit. It turns out that thanks to the work of Dr. Charles Sirhan at Harvard, he discovered that there is a series of molecules that travel with the omega-3 fatty acids in physiology and health that are called specialized pro-resolving mediators, or SPMs, lengthy name. What do? No, what they do is they quench or stop inflammation. They're not anti-inflammatories, but rather they put brakes on the inflammation process. So once it starts, it doesn't just continue forever. And these SPMs are found in minimally processed oils, omega-3 oils. Unfortunately, in a lot of the commercial omega-3 supplements, they're removed because of the processing that the oils undergo. In fact, most people don't know this, but most omega-3 fatty acid supplements that people buy in stores are ultra-processed oils. Like we've heard a lot about seed oils. Well, they're the same kind of processing. They're deodorized and distilled and deesterified and all sorts of different chemical processes to make them stable to put into capsule. Mm-hmm. So you want to look for minimally processed natural omega-3s because they then contain also these SPMs, these favorable inflammation blockers. It's interesting that probably the best source of these omega-3 with SPMs are cod liver oil, going way back to maybe the first supplement ever been used in humans back to Egyptian times or even maybe before. So minimally processed cod liver oil is rich in both EPA, DHA, and vitamin A and D and SPMs. So that's the second thing. The third thing is related to gut health, and that is the pre and probiotics that stimulate a proper microbiome that communicates properly with our immune system of our intestinal tract. where I said 70% of our immunity resides. So there are certain kinds of fibers, both insoluble and soluble fibers, that are friendly food for the good bacteria that live in our gut. And then there are the certain forms of these bacteria, which we now know have very health-promoting characteristics. One that's received a lot of attention recently is this Akkermansia muciniphila, which helps to protect the lining of our intestinal tracts, the so-called mucus lining. That's very, very important for the integrity of defense against stuff that we don't want to get into our body. We want to keep it out. So I think the combination of those three things in our diet is extraordinarily important. The polyphenols from the fruits and vegetables and grains and legumes, the omega-3 fatty acids, and then lastly, the prebiotics that are the food for the friendly bacteria and the probiotics. So putting those together is what we call an immunorejuvenation program. It's really turning the clock back on the age of your immune system and rejuvenating it.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I just finished a book that came out about a month and a half ago, and I talked about building a metabolically healthy plate, but that a metabolically healthy plate that is supporting and rejuvenating the immune system. So a lot of polyphenols, a lot of probiotic and prebiotic rich foods, some fiber. How are we getting more and more fiber? And really being practical about how to get more fiber in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then omega-3 fatty acids and ways that we can incorporate those into our diet as well outside of supplementation. Although if that's the only path I'm a big fan of however you're getting your omegas, get them into your system. And then, for my midlife ladies, prioritizing protein to make sure that they are feeling more satiated so they're not reaching for the ultra processed or the ancillary carbs and sugar. So I agree. And I think when people think about our metabolic health or our cellular energy, we really have to come from the standpoint of how are we reducing inflammation and how are we supporting our gut microbiome, because it's all interconnected. Nothing's operating in a silo, as you have so beautifully presented.
Well, no, I think you're hitting this. Is what you just said is a drop the mic. That's really an important kind of takeaway from this discussion. We've been studying kind of ancient diets and ancient cultures as to what was it that led to things like the blue zones, where people live to be 100 years of age and still have their health, and they haven't had access to modern medicine. And they also haven't had access to ultra-processed foods. And so when we look at these kinds of situations, we find that there are three foods that have been husbanded or grown by humans for over 3,500 years. One is millet, which is found in the Indian continent. The second is something we've been very interested in called Tartary buckwheat. Tartary comes from the Tartan district of China in the Himalayan foothills. And the third is what's called black soy, which was the original soybean, was this black soy that is very rich in these polyphenols that are immune protective. And when you start looking at these cultures that ate those diets, you find out that food is medicine. They were eating good food, but it was also good medicine for their immune system and their health.
Good molecular information. Yes,
that's exactly right. So actually, that's the whole reason that I made this decision. I was going to start one last endeavor, which I'm calling Big Bold Health, this little company, to really try to understand how things like Tartary buckwheat actually influence the immune system and to reduce biological age and to improve longevity and to reduce the risk of inflammation-related diseases. So we started down this road. We now own farms in upstate New York that are regenerative agriculture approved to produce Tartary buckwheat. And we now have our own boats in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, that are producing our own cod liver oil for us in a pharmaceutical grade plant that we built with native Alaskans in Alaska. So I've really got my hands in the soil now for the first time, and my hands on the fishing pole to some extent. These are line cod. So it reminds me that there's old things that we can learn in new ways, and that we can leverage these things into remarkable applications to people's health. I mean, the stories that we have now of people that are taking these products and turning around their symptoms is just amazing to me. Like sleeping better, more energy, less pain, digestive problems go away, skin clears. I mean, all sorts of things that you say, well, how do all those things happen? Because the immune system is now your friend. It's no longer your enemy.
And I think that's the big message. That is the mic drop moment for you, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, is that really understanding that we can get the immune system to work for us, that it doesn't need to be in this chronic state of inflammation, that we can turn it around. I had Dr. Austin Perlmutter on the show back in the summertime around July, and we got into, we were talking mostly about cognitive decline and, what are the early signs or like way early indicators that we may be experiencing that? What are the drivers of neuroinflammation inside of the brain? But we got into the buckwheat. I know that he's been partnering with you on this in this journey. And so it was really fun to connect the dots between just from the lens of cognitive decline. I mean, the immune system is whether it's affecting the reproductive system you talked about with infertility rates going up, whether it's affecting the brain where we see more cognitive decline happening, particularly in women, 67%, or it is cardiovascular disease, stroke and ischemic attack. And so, across the board, we're seeing these chronic conditions driven by inflammation. Pick wherever the immune system is affecting, that disease is being driven by a wayward immune system.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've really put the right exclamation point on what I'm trying to communicate. There's nothing in my life that gives me greater satisfaction when someone comes up to me, which happens fairly frequently, and says, hey, I want to tell you that you did the following. And, I say, well, I really didn't do anything. I provided information, but people will give credit if they assume that something that they've done has made big improvements in their life. And for me, it's when people say, I've just been able to have a child. I had 3 unsuccessful IVFs, and now I got on this program. I took your words of advice and I started applying it, and now I have a healthy child. I mean, it only takes a few of those to recognize these are big deals. Or people will come up to me and say, you did something that turned around the clock for me in terms of my ability to perform and function at a higher level, and to not feel like I'm slipping away, to feel like I'm actually regaining a lot of my intention as to what I want to do as an individual, both my energy level and my ability to think clearly, my ability to communicate. All these things are interwoven tightly with, as you said, into our immune system function. And I think that's why I've been so excited to be involved with this Big Bold Health. And in fact, we now, and this is a collaboration with Dr. Perlmutter and myself, we've just initiated what we believe to be the largest clinical double-blind placebo-controlled trial ever done in the history of science. 850 people in a placebo-blinded fashion to look at the effect of this tartary buckwheat. Actually, it's the sprout powder that's developed from the tartary buckwheat seed on cognitive health and on immune function, where we are measuring immune function using a gene chip analysis while we're also measuring cognitive ability and alertness and sleep cycling and energy levels in 850 people over a 90-day period. The results of this study will produce a data set that's never been seen before. And I think what we're going to learn is the rule of reasonableness, that science supports the fact that when you intervene with the right thing, that your body in a fairly short period of time, 3 months, can turn itself around. And I'm speaking, here without having the data in hand, but we did publish a preliminary trial that we did with 50 people in over 3 months. We published that in a major journal in November of last year. And that showed very significant alterations in immune age. In fact, we saw a 47% reduction in the rate of immune aging in people after 3 months. So I think we're going to see something quite dramatic with people who just do one thing, and that is take Himalayan tartary buckwheat sprout powder each day as part of their program and eat whatever else they've normally eaten, and we'll see what effect it has on their immune system and their cognitive function.
Wow, that is incredible. And in terms of apps, I'm assuming this is available now, Dr. Jeffrey Bland. Yeah. So,
yeah, actually, if they go to the Big Bold Health website, there's a whole discussion about tartary buckwheat and our fish oils.
Oh, wonderful. And how do you recommend, if someone's listening to this and they are like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. Obviously, the cod liver oil, we know how to do that. But is the powder form for the tartary buckwheat, do you put it into a drink, or do you just...
Yeah, the nice thing about it is because it's so concentrated in these immune active compounds, you only need a couple of teaspoons a day. So it can be put on as a condiment. It can be put into a beverage. It can be baked into things. We put it actually on a dispenser on the kitchen table now so that people can just throw it on something throughout the day.
Okay. So it's that easy. It's that accessible.
The nice thing about it has kind of a nutty flavor. So it's a very mild flavor, and requiring only 2 teaspoons a day, it's not like a big task to figure out how to put it into something.
Yeah, that's great. I love that so much. And I'll have the link in the show notes for you guys to go and check it out as well. And in terms of dosage for the cod liver oil, is this already pre-capsule or is it in liquid form?
You can get it either way. I think for most people, we found that they like the capsules. I personally take the oil, but, a lot of people, it's just the concept of taking cod liver oil. Although ours is very neutral in flavor.
You are the OG of functional medicine, so I see you taking the actual oil.
Yeah, I have to say that I probably would do things that most people probably don't. So I think the capsules, and it's 2 to 4 capsules a day, provides the level of EPA and DHA plus the pro-resolving meteors that we're talking about, along with vitamin A and D.
Yeah, and I've had some brain injury moments over the last couple of years. And so SPMs have been a big part of my protocol, but I've taken those separately because you're right. I don't find them in omegas. Mm-hmm. So I love the idea that it's all wrapped into one. It's less supplements to take.
Yeah, I think also in cost efficiency, because the SPM formulas,
they're expensive.
They are expensive, and have nature do it for us is
it's very practical. Nice. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And the argument I've had with my patients is like, what is your brain worth? So, take the supplements, but it's nice that it's all combined. So thank you for that. I want to really quickly steer the conversation away from food, because I know food is the biggest game player here. If there was an area of focus for your immune system, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That is where we start. Are there other recommendations, other non-negotiables for you, Dr. Bland, even in your own life, but also for, educating clinicians or even for patients that you recommend for supporting their immune system?
Yeah, I think there's, again, quite a bit of new data, new literature that supports doing some simple things each day. And I'm going to say the obvious, but just to remind people that
I think
this
it's
really...
a reminder, especially from you.
So I think everyone should get at least 30 minutes a day of some kind of activity. And this, could be vigorous walking, or it could be stationary bike, or it could be treadmill, or it could be, any number of things. It doesn't have to be training for a marathon. The Nurses' Health Study, which was recently just published on the exercise, found that walking 20 minutes a day on level ground at a modest pace, not a speed pace, but a modest pace, had measurable benefits on immune health. So when a person says, I really can't go to a gym, or I don't want to have to dress and undress and get back in, I don't have the time. No, you can do this in the daily life just by parking your car a little farther away from the store, or, simple things, walking the dog, or these can be, but they have to be done every day. It has to be part of your regime, not just kind of periodically. And so that's certainly part of my daily regime. I try to get, somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes a day and it both is kind of the aerobic exercise, but then some strength and conditioning exercise too, some resistance exercise, which you can do chair exercising if you don't have, a lot of equipment available, any kind of resistance exercise, and there are whole regimes that you can find on isometric exercise that will build muscle and create strength. So that's number one. Number two then is obviously sleep. And, there's 2 aspects of sleep that I think are important to consider. One is the duration of sleep, and the other is the quality of sleep. And fortunately now we have these sleep trackers that do help us to understand a little bit better how we are sleeping, both in terms of time and quality. Some people are more biohackers than others. Some people don't like wearing devices because it makes them phobic.
I love bioobservability, Dr. Bland. Yes, exactly. Real-time data elicits real-time change.
I agree with you, but I've also come to recognize that there's some people that get neurotic over it too.
So you're true.
And so everything isn't in balance, or not.
Everything is in a balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that this sleep thing, and for me, there are certain things you learn if you're tracking your sleep that you shouldn't do before you try to go to sleep. Like, I think it's a general rule of people that I've spoken to that start having a sleep tracker that they've learned that alcohol too late in the day is not a good idea. It really throws your sleep off, your quality of sleep.
Yeah.
And, people say, well, I just had wine for dinner. Yeah, you had quite a bit of wine for dinner, and then you went to bed an hour later, and then you wondered why your sleep was all confused. So I think there's a variety of things we learn about maybe certain foods that cause our stomach to be overly active while we're trying to sleep, because Our energy can be sucked up by digestion. 50% of our energy could be used for digestion if we've just eaten a big heavy meal before we try to sleep. So I think that learning how our sleep rhythms, which are individual, our circadian rhythms, can be our friend and not our enemy is very, very important. I try to get personally about 7 hours of sleep a night, of which I'd like something like at least an hour of it to be deep sleep. That would be my target. I think different people have different goals, but for me, if I'm achieving that on a regular basis, I can tell the overall performance that it has for me as in terms of advantage. So sleep is number 2. Number 3 is a little bit more tricky because it's a word that we all use. It's like the word love, that we all use the word love, but it can have many different meanings, and you want to use it in the right context. If you're really wanting, you say, you love that person in an agape way, but they translate it to be amore, that can produce problems. So you have to use this concept of stress in the proper way because certain levels of stress are desirable, right? Yeah. We can have stress power. But then when we push it over the edge, it becomes distress. And now that's where we start to have adverse effects on our immune system. So, and this is also very personal. I think some people have a bigger tolerance to manage stuff that produces stress and maybe even be energized by it. And then other people, the same level produces a distress response. So I think, people talk about, adrenal reserve and your emotional reserve and resilience. Yes, all of those things are part of a healthy immune system. As you build your immune system's vitality, you have more resilience to stress. That is true. Or as you build your resilience to stress, you have more immune reserve. So it's a two-way street. It's like immunometabolism. A strong immune system helps your metabolism. A strong metabolism helps your immune system. They're all interwoven. So I think that this concept of knowing where you get to your edge and where you're pushing over from the stress power to the distress, dysfunction is really important. And so everyone should have a safe place, a safe harbor. For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's listening to music. Some people, it's reading a book. Some people, it's a good conversation. Some people, it's their spiritual belief systems. I mean, there are many, many ways to find your safe harbor for your emotions. And that is, when that occurs, your nervous system is speaking to your immune system with smiles rather than with hostility. And I think that's a very important part of building reserve and resilience.
I love that. You had mentioned the blue zones, and I think all of these aspects are what we see a lot in the blue zone communities. One aspect I'm curious if you've looked at the research in terms of community and connection as it relates to the immune system as well, or even just to feel safe. And I wonder if that's that correlation is just the safety aspect of things. But I think about one of the biggest predictors of premature aging is loneliness and isolation and how that can drive an immune system that is hypervigilant and deregulated.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully stated, and that's exactly right. We are social organisms. We are individuals that do well when we're connected in positive ways to other individuals, that we refine our own view by the views of others. It becomes part of a process of community development. So I think about the immune system. We have what we call community. And it reminds me a little bit of the studies that we're all aware of when menstruating college-aged women move together into a dormitory and their menstrual cycles all become harmonized, So these
that
rhythms.
Happens, all my friends.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And, although men don't have menstrual cycles, you can see similar situations as it relates to group compatibility as it pertains to hormonal rhythms in men. So I think that this construct that we're trying to seek out a normative structure that supports the best of who we are. And that structure, if it's whatever, a work environment, a relationship environment, a family relationship, or wherever it might be, that's stealing from us our ability to gain resilience, then that needs to be corrected.
I agree with you. What I educate a lot about is stacking a lot of these lifestyle strategies, having a metabolically healthy meal with friends at the table, and having good conversation, going for a walk with a friend or family member after a meal, where we can really stack a lot of these things that are helping to support our immune system and ultimately to feel more healthful as we move through life. Because I think a lot of these beautiful, lifestyle interventions can, when we're stacking them with the people that we love or we're kind of imparting them together, it doesn't feel like as much of a lift, and so that's one of the things that I love to talk about is like, okay, how do we balance blood sugar on the back end of a meal with a friend? Or how do we build community through activity?
Yes. I think you're hitting on the real rules of the road that if we implement in our lives really pay dividends. I'm reminded in 2025, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was awarded to 3 individuals, for 2 of whom I actually know and are colleagues from previous years, Mary Bruchow and Fred Ramsdell. Their Nobel Prize was awarded to them for the discovery of a cell type in the immune system called the T regulatory cell. And it turns out that this particular cell type in the immune system is controlled by a specific gene called the FOXP3 gene. And this gene is kind of like a master controller. It's a transcription factor that then regulates 1,000 other genes. So it has a big outsized effect. And what it does is it translates how to be at home with our cells. The T regulatory cell and the FOXP3 gene allows your body's immune system to say, what's a friend? And to remain friends with your environment. When that system is disturbed, the body starts seeing itself then as an alien, and that leads into things like autoimmune disease. And so if you think about what that means, it means that cell type, the T regulatory cell, and that gene in that cell, the FOXP3 gene, is your measurement of tolerance. How tolerant are you? And I then use a social metaphor to that. I say, when we feel that we're not safe, it shifts us behaviorally into an intolerant state. Our immune system also shifts into an intolerant state, and we have more inflammation. We are the god of war, Mars. The color is red. That's inflammation. And that's an intolerant state where our immune system doesn't feel safe. So, which means that probably we don't feel safe.
Yeah, no, exactly. Us not feeling safe is a proxy for our immune system.
That's exactly right.
Vigilant state. Yeah.
That's how I see it. So when we are tuning our immune system, we're actually tuning how we're living in the world to feel safe. And it's relationships, it's environment, it's our food. If our food is unsafe, then our body is unsafe. So I think that's a really powerful metaphor to where we want to navigate our life to be, in a tolerant, safe place.
I wholeheartedly agree. Dr. Bland, it has been such a pleasure to get to have you on the show, to get to talk about the immune system, but ultimately bringing it back to safety. And that if our bodies are safe, if we are safe, and we're helping to support our bodies, our immune system is safe, and we get to live a more healthy life. I think that's ultimately the goal, is that we have the freedom to do the things that we want as we are turning 80.
Exactly right.
And continuing to live our mission and to be with our families and to live a beautiful life. And so I love this. It definitely starts with the immune system and the nervous system. I'm so grateful we touched upon that. Dr. Bland, where would you love us to find you? So Big Bold Health, tell us the website one more time so I can make sure.
Yeah, Big Bold Health, it will tell you all about this fish oils and the tardive buckwheat and all that kind of stuff. I also have my own website, jeffreybland.com, that has a lot of my stuff that I've published over the years and things I've done. And then lastly, the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute that you attended their annual meeting, has its own website that I have a featured section on there. Actually, there's a virtual Jeff Bland there that you can ask me a question, and I will answer the question the best I can. My family's pretty freaked out about this because the Jeff Bland avatar has my voice, because I recorded my voice, and then it's using artificial intelligence. It draws its information from me and uses my voice. So it's a little bit scary, but it's also making this information available. So
there we go.
We're in a new era.
We are in a new era, that is for sure. Well, definitely we'll have all the links in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you so much for your wisdom, for, the change that you have wanted in the world, that you are creating in the world. Thank you for the many of us as clinicians and educators for being that North Star for us. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And I would say right back to you, I feel the same way about what you're doing. We're forming, as I said, a community of people to help one another to aspire and achieve 100 years at least of good living. That's what we're up to.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You be well.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.